RPGs have always held a special place in my heart and the hearts of many others. Whether you like masterpieces like Fallout New Vegas or Skyrim from Bethesda, or JRPG classics like Pokemon and Persona, these games resonate with tons of people and are fittingly one of the most popular game genres. However, it's quite rare to find these games for free, and even paid recent RPGs have left many people disappointed. What if I told you there was an incredible free RPG on Steam that's given me, in the very least, more playtime than most games I've paid for? Well, that was the title of the video. Eremidia is an RPG maker game where you play as this guy who's been trapped by a man who recently hit 1000 ELO on chess.com, now calls himself the Chess Master. He tells you have to play his game and aren't given much information outside that. So, now you're here in the Ghetto Space Library with my new girlfriend Ruby, who will inevitably never love me. She tells you need to complete the challenge that apparently your book is some ancient artifact with which you can summon things, and you need to explore the deeper alleys of the Space Ghetto Library. In each alley, you'll attempt to navigate a sort of mini-dungeon to get to a boss, and proceed deeper into the alley, which is just to say increase the level of enemies there. The alleys are composed of 5 different, fairly simple tiles. First is the Hood tile. You've walked into the wrong part of town, and now any sort of delinquent may ride up on you trying to fight. These fights can range from a group of slimes who will just get one-shot, to bird crusaders who will instantly kill your team before you get the chance to move. You do get to see what type of enemy will come before starting the battle, which is nice as you can rearrange your formation, though I've never done this as I always forget. You also get the option of bribing them if you're a wimp, though in general it's kind of worth fighting them to assert yourself as the alpha, and get the rewards and XP, mostly the XP, but you gotta be alpha too. There are also dialogue box tiles, which for the most part are just going to be shop squares where you buy and sell stuff. You can also do that in the main area, but sometimes they might not have the body pillow you want in stock, so it's good to check there, as there are different shopkeepers that rotate in different areas. The third type of tile is loot box tiles, which when you first start are mostly just heals or general nice items, but as you go deeper into the alley, more and more become enemy combat squares, which can be incredibly crippling and completely alter how a dungeon will go. For context, take these 2 dungeon runs. In this one I fought, beat the enemy, healed up, got some loot, beat more enemies when I expected, and healed before the boss and beat it. Pretty standard. Then take this run. This is just a level 3 alley, by the way, which is not particularly deep, though I do play on hard mode. But I went into a loot box tile, got death, quite literally, which is just a boss. Then I had to do a fight square. The next loot box tile, I hoped for healing. Well, no, another boss. Nice. Then I had to do another fight, then another loot box, which surely wouldn't be. Oh, well, at least it was just a normal one. Then I had to do another fight, and surely this last loot box. Oh well. Regardless of how RNG and annoying that may seem, it actually is really fun. It'd be much more grindy and formulaic if each floor was simply just fight, heal. It's much more fun when you get the true Toronto experience. Also, I can note you can skip over loot box tiles, but no, what if there's loot? Our next tile is the treasure tile, and they're the simplest as they just give you loot, though I prefer the loot from loot boxes as it feels more like gambling, and gambling's good. Finally, we have boss tiles, which are just hood tiles to the extreme. There are some special bosses that only spawn in certain types of alleyways, and some that are available in all. Most of the time, especially in hard mode, every boss poses a massive threat, even if it's a level you consider low, though there is a decent bit of variance in boss difficulty. So, for example, you could face Joe Biden in his natural form, attempting to defeat his dementia and kill you, only to fail miserably and be basically a confirmed win.
She was 12, I was 30, but anyway.
Or Big Rockman, who's seeing how fast he can one-shot you. Or you could fight this boss. Guess which boss I've died to the most times? I swear, it's just a hard boss. On hard mode and deeper alley levels on normal, the bosses gain multiple facets to them, making them much harder. For example, Allroad gets a legion of simping flowers she can summon at her will that'll attempt to put you to sleep and kill you to please their queen. Meanwhile, Anyways, for beating a boss, you'll get quite a bit of loot and you'll unlock a new character. There's 75 characters in total, which is really crazy for this free Steam game. Some of these are powerful angels, some masters of the blades training for decades, and some are Greg. Regardless, there's a team configuration for everyone. In fact, I'd even argue multiple for everyone. One of the biggest problems I've had with the game is how many cool characters there are that I just want to keep constructing teams around all of them, leading to me doing so in many different playthroughs. Though, this is a really good problem to have, similar to how I'm too handsome to get dates as my good looks are too intimidating. Once you've collected a couple units, you'll want to start team building. This is where a lot of the fun comes in, but to understand team building, we need to talk about the combat we're building for. The game features a custom combat system where you play on an 8x3 field where moving around the field can allow your character to dodge or set up massive attacks. This is where the crux of its satisfying gameplay lies, and is done impressively well. Most characters have a range that limits them, with melee characters having the shortest for obvious reasons, and ranged characters will have varying ranges depending on their weapon type, with things like shotguns being closer to melee, and things like bows and stuff being longer range. This is complemented by the fact each character has their own custom abilities, ranging from a mild sword swipe to a this. This limit applies to enemies as well, which is honestly really nicely done. You can look at an enemy you've never fought before and see, well, he only has a sword, so he's probably melee, and you're right. So if you don't want a unit to be damaged, you can move them to the back of the field and watch as the AI senselessly tries to move into range before reaching an untimely demise. This works quite effectively until you meet bosses, who appear at their short range, but then will pull out health-dependent massive AoE nukes that activate at any range and instantly kill you. This sounds and looks mildly unfair, however, this is what makes it fun. Finding out how not to be one-shot by a massive muscular rock that's kinda hot introduces strategy, as otherwise half the fights you just sit at the bottom row of your side and snipe from a distance, but frankly, no one likes a beta male, trust me I know. Each unit's turn they can only do one attack, however if they have a quick cast ability they can cast that then attack. However, casting 2 quick casted moves will still end the turn. You can also move around or use items on a unit's turn, which also counts as a quick cast move, in addition to using items also being position dependent. Many characters also have a movement ability or mechanic built right in, which makes it very telling a lot of thought was put into how the characters would interact with the system, as opposed to just throwing a bunch of waifu sprites into a world giving them random magic effects. But now that we know the gist of combat, we can get into my favorite part, team building. Inherently, when you have 75 characters, your team building will be quite in depth, but fortunately to not overwhelm the player, you do have the limit of only unlocking 1 per floor. This is fundamentally what I think makes Eremidia a beautiful game. You have so many options at your disposal for making a team, that realistically you could probably play the game dozens of times and have a different, cool, viable team each time. Not only is there incredible variety, each individual character has its own personalities and lore behind them, which you'll get to see when they give one-liners during the game, or if you choose to read the character's story. Especially given many of these characters have ally buffing moves or passives which can synergize really well, it's truly a paradise for anyone who enjoys building up a team. I think the most similar games I felt while playing was an RPG like Pokemon with the team building, or even Magic the Gathering, as due to the complexity at times, gave me the same pleasure of making a deck in MTG Arena. Though, you shouldn't let the large options scare you. The team building is really straightforward to understand, and most of its complexity is just there if you choose to search for special combinations of units, or are like me and just end up making a bunch of different teams. Overall though, I think the gameplay alone warrants a play. However, there's obviously much more to an RPG than just combat. For instance, sound design is incredibly important and well, Eremidia really doesn't slack. Things like the sound design of the intro, playing into this lovely piece at the start, which is surprisingly long if you let it play and has a lot of depth to it. Additionally, the combat music can vary a lot and generally always feels natural. Sometimes you have a very hype piece, and sometimes you have a really lovely jazzy piece that's more chill. However, when the boss fights roll around, they always have a hype-fitting piece that gets you really excited. Not to mention how satisfying the ability sounds are in addition to most other common things you do. Another trait that should be appreciated is the visuals. They have so much custom art for an RPG Maker game that the game feels incredibly beautiful, especially for a free game. The UI is exceptionally lovely with a lot of clever ideas and good character design choices, in addition to the combat abilities looking incredible and being super satisfying visually. Overall, I want to be a bit honest about the problems that the game has, though in general it doesn't have too many. This is illustrated pretty well if you just look at the Steam reviews, where there's only one negative review, which is pretty well unclear. You can even see the dev try to understand it, so this review really isn't that poignant. The game does have some lag and occasional bugs, which is kind of expected with such a large project and small developer. However, it's very rare, and at least for me, I find the lag kinda cool sometimes, since it usually happens during cool animations, so it's almost like slow-mo, except stuttering. Overall, though, that's fairly trivial, but there is a main issue I have with the game which will require me to get into spoilers, so if you don't want them or anything, you can skip to this part. I'll put a timestamp on the screen if I remember. In the story, as I said, we start by talking to the chess master. However, overall the plot isn't super deep. It kind of just revolves around you just doing 10 boss fights against the chess master, which are kind of the story fights of the game. Though he does say some kind of cool lines commenting on your team, which is fun, the fights are much less interesting than the alley fights for the most part, and the culmination of the story felt fairly mediocre, though kind of makes me seem like the game was mostly testing for a really cool combat system in our style, so this isn't really that much of a problem. However, I do think the game could have been improved by some additional plot going on since we learn very little. Ironically, the biographies about each character are almost all more interesting stories than the games, which at least makes individual characters cool in their own way. Overall, if you're looking for an RPG game with fantastic character art and a unique take on typical JRPG combat, this is really the game for you, especially since it's free and the file size is really small, so even if you instantly hate it or something, you can just get rid of it. Also, if you want to support the dev in any way, I'll link their socials in the description. And funnily enough, as I was writing the script, they actually released the demo for their new game, Scarlet Record. So if you're into demos, you can check that out. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you have any suggestions for how I can improve my content for this type, as it's my first time doing a review, I'd appreciate them in the comments. I hope you have a nice day.